And first of all, congratulations on being here. You are to be commended not only for the work that you put in through the year, but also for making it here to the final. So want to start with that. Want to start off by saying, hey, look, on behalf of each of the judges, even before we've heard a word come out of your mouths, we're proud of you. So want to start with that. My name is Lindsay Draper. I am a retired, whatever it is, judicial official here in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. I'm currently Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion of the Institute for Wellbeing in Law. And my cohorts are my colleagues.
I am Robert Allison. I teach history at Suffolk University, which is in Boston, though I should say I did spend my formative years in the great state of New Jersey. So I look forward to your presentation even more.
I'm Jack Barlow. I teach politics at Juniata College here in neighboring Pennsylvania. And I would especially like to, since he's muted, I will say happy birthday to Alan Broadman. So welcome to everybody.
And could you introduce yourselves and your teacher and Mr. Brown?
Hello, my name is Rahil. I'm a senior in East Brunswick High School, and I just want to thank you for spending your time with us today.
Hi, my name is Sarah Levin. I'm also a senior at East Brunswick High School, and I'm really excited to begin.
Hi, my name is Shanaja. I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School, and I'm very excited to be here.
Hi, my name is Michael. I'm also a senior. I've learned a lot about US government and politics from this competition, and I like watching Formula One.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and it's really nice to meet you all.
Good. Well, okay, we're going to be doing the first question out of Unit 2. What were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution? Begin.
Major disagreements at the Constitutional Convention concerned the necessity of a Bill of Rights, distribution of state votes in Congress, balance of state and federal power, method of presidential elections, role of the national judiciary, extent of presidential power, and abolishment of the slave trade. When Elbridge Gerry proposed a Bill of Rights, delegates like Hamilton argued that enumerated liberties were dangerous, as there would be exceptions to powers not granted. However, anti-federalists like Robert Yates declared that without enumerated rights, the government would cause injury and oppression of those over whom they are placed, leading to Madison's 12 proposed amendments.
Regarding presidential elections, some delegates felt a popular vote would work best, but others, like George Mason, believed the Republic's immense size would hinder public awareness of candidates, degrading the election to a trial of colors to a blind man. The delegates settled on the Electoral College, through which the president would be chosen by electors appointed from state legislatures. Furthermore, while Southern delegates defended the necessity of the slave trade, Northern delegates like Gouverneur Morris vehemently opposed it, calling slavery a curse of heaven on the states where it prevailed. However, the North ultimately prioritized unity over morality, tolerating slavery to secure Southern approval for the Constitution.
Issues that were not resolved during the convention included slavery, the extent of executive authority, enumeration of individual rights, clarification of judicial powers, government authority over immigration, and the definition of federal citizenship. Madison warned that by an inevitable chain of cause and effects, Providence punishes national sins by national calamities, which pushed delegates to prioritize ratification and settle for the 3/5 compromise. Southern slave states received a disproportionately greater influence on national policy, which exacerbated tensions leading up to the Civil War. Furthermore, the extent of pardon power was unresolved, allowing presidents such as Andrew Johnson to grant over 13,000 pardons. Stephen Mihm, associate professor of history at the University of Georgia, described the pardon under Johnson as a brutally effective political weapon.
Changes that should be made to the Constitution include a more democratic amendment process, semi-centennial constitutional conventions, Supreme Court justice term limits, an expanded House, external review of presidential pardons, a lowered age requirement for congressional candidacy, and the allowance of naturalized citizens to become president. Currently, the amendment process is too difficult because, according to Justice Scalia, the 13 least populous states, or just 2% of the US population, can block an amendment's ratification. The amendment process could be modified to still require a supermajority in Congress, but also a simple majority in a national referendum.
We would also require new semi-centennial constitutional conventions. Federal Judge Malcolm R. Wilkie, while calling for a new convention, argued that the Constitution has been corrupted by members of Congress who focus excessively on getting reelected. Therefore, semi-centennial conventions would facilitate revisions for modern issues to the Constitution, such as campaign finance reform. Furthermore, staggered 18-year term limits for justices would guarantee each president at least 2 appointments to the Supreme Court, which, according to scholar Erwin Chemerinsky, would prevent a court that reflects political choices from decades earlier. These term limits would greatly reduce instances of polarization in the nomination process, such as when Mitch McConnell rejected President Barack Obama's nominations at the end of his presidency, but accepted Amy Coney Barrett's nomination at the end of Trump's term.
Thank you. So there are people like me who are quite a bit longer in the tooth than you all are, who remember 2 nominees that President Nixon made to the Supreme Court, Carswell and Hainsworth, who just didn't get any traction for purely political reasons. And it had, well, I guess, and the question I'm asking is, do we really want to change the Supreme Court based on the politics of the time? And I throw that out to you to say that this isn't a new issue. This has been here all along, and maybe there's some reasons why it's been, they're there for what amounts to life term. Do you really want to make that kind of change?
I think that this change is very important because although the politics behind the issue isn't the most important factor, because we have the long term for Supreme Court justices, the founders never intended for that. They intended for justices to serve for about 10, 15 years because the life terms were a little bit shorter back then. But today we have justices such as William O. Douglas or Chief Justice Rehnquist, who were in such a condition that they weren't even able to serve on the court. And Stanford Levinson called Rehnquist a narcissist because he stayed on the court long enough and his voice wasn't even counted to a certain point. So I think having these term limits would reduce that a lot, and it would help our country come together.
I also think it's important to note that enacting justice term limits is not necessarily a radical idea, because there's really no other country on the world that has Supreme Court life terms, and none of the 50 states also have life terms for the justices. We simply believe that having limits on the justices would prevent polarization, such as with the Amy Coney Barrett example and the Obama example.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, with all due respect to Professor Levinson, he probably didn't think that Justice Douglas was a narcissist, or Chief Justice Marshall, or others who have served a long time. Those of us who are longer in the tooth may think a little bit differently. I'm wondering though, you had a great quote from Madison about the size of republics. And one of the real fears at the time was that you could not have an extensive republic. The republics needed to be small. And now I am wondering if you think the country is too big to be under one government, if in fact Montesquieu was right after all.
Yeah, I definitely agree with their points. I think we've seen that with the diversity and the polarization in modern politics that can sometimes hinder political representation. We saw this in 2013 when the government had to shut down simply because there was just too much inter-party fighting between Democrats and Republicans for there to even be a budget proposal for the government. And I think that having so many viewpoints, so many representatives as well, it sometimes does hinder government operations.
I believe that our government is not necessarily too large, but we need an increased number of representatives in order to accurately represent the constituents, especially today in the House of Representatives. Each representative represents millions and millions of people, and they're not able to accurately accurately represent the views of all of those people. So we propose an increased number of people in the House of Representatives so that their constituents have their views accurately represented.
I have to disagree with Michael and Shanija because I believe that the government is way too large for these many people in America. The amendment process has been greatly inhibited due to the large size of the population and such polarizing views in Democrats and Republicans. For example, the Equal Rights Amendment has been proposed in the mid-1900s, and yet we have yet to see a ratification in such an important amendment.
I'm wondering what you all would think about term limits for, say, members of the House of Representatives or the Senate. You've advocated term limits for the Supreme Court. Would that work for Congress too?
I think it would work for Congress, and congressional term limits is actually an issue that has great public support. There's a Gallup poll that shows 75% of Americans actually support congressional term limits. And I think that it allows for us to have more modern ideas of government. For instance, someone like Bernie Sanders has been serving since the mid-1900s. And I think that if we introduce new, younger people who have more progressive ideas of government, that it would lead to a government that more accurately represents the ideas of the people.
I think it's also very important to make that kind of a change with term limits because as we've seen with representatives who just simply stay on in Congress for so long, many times they're not able to keep up with modern changes like the internet, which has significantly changed American society as we know it. We saw this with the hearings multiple times with people like Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai, in which it's been proved that many congressmen simply are woefully incompetent with understanding things like the internet and social media. I think that term limits could be important in having representatives that are more up to date with current issues.
So isn't there something to be said for the electorate choosing who they want to be in Congress? I mean, that if I've got somebody that I keep voting for because I like the job they're doing, who has the right to say, no, you can't have what you want? They've been there too long and they've learned too much. Why should they be limited?
I personally don't think that the limits are necessary. The way I would approach this would be to simply extend congressional terms to be a little bit longer, like the Senate, rather than having it every 6 years, maybe every 8 years, because it has been shown that a lot of candidates who are in Congress, they spend a majority of their term campaigning to be reelected again. So by increasing their term by a little bit, we can have more delegates. Like in the House of Representatives, we have Terry Sewell from the 7th District of Alabama, who advocates for new job opportunities and economic development. And these types of people, we need them to be there longer and not focus on their campaigns as much.
Thank you.
So,
Let Lindsay.
no, I'm. How would that play out without campaign finance reform? If we didn't reform campaign finances, but we gave everybody a longer term, isn't that just going to make campaigns more expensive? Or the rarer they are, the more costly they are, isn't it? Aren't they?
We do believe that campaign finance reform is extremely important. Right now, we have these super PACs that can donate millions and millions of dollars to the campaigns of their choosing. And I know that major corporations also donate a lot of money. So campaign finance reform is, may I please finish my sentence?
Yes.
Campaign finance reform is most definitely important, but we think that by ensuring these term limits, we would ensure that we have we would have more quality representation in Congress.
Okay, thanks.
Are we out of time?
Right now we are.
Okay. Well, first off, good job. Let's start with that. I need to begin with that. So you raised a number of issues, and I really am so sorry I didn't get a chance to keep talking to you. I wanted to ask you if what you were suggesting is a constitutional amendment to restrict the pardon power. I mean, I was so thrilled that you talked about that. Wasn't sure if I heard you saying we need a constitutional amendment to do that. But I wanted to get back to that issue because that was one that I believe was critical. I'm gonna be real honest with you. When we get a break, I'm gonna go look and see when Bernie Sanders first got to the Senate, because when you talk about the mid 20th century, that's when I showed up on the earth, and I'm not really sure that I believe Sanders has been there since I've been around. So I want to go check that.
Seems like it.
But anyway, I know we have a limited amount of time to do this. I also wanted to talk to you about the semi-centennial Constitutional Convention, in that I believe the can of worms that would open up would be just unbelievably scary. Having said all that, you all were fun, and I think it's kind of interesting how many little roads you all had me wanting to go by, and maybe that's a good thing. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
I agree. I think each representative represents 750,000 people. It's not millions and millions, but still that's a huge number. And at the time of the Constitution, it was 30,000, which was thought an absurdly large number that couldn't possibly be represented. I think the ideas you are proposing, I think, are wildly wrong, but I think the fact you're really thinking about how we can change this, how it can be improved, was really interesting. It's fascinating. And also the fact that you were also thinking about the convention itself and the problems they were trying to grapple with. And some of them were big and some of them were less so. And I think the real genius of Madison was looking at all of these little problems and then focusing on, so what are the big structural things we can do to solve these other things, and what are the ones we can kick down the road? I mean, it was a fascinating discussion we've had, and I am also sorry we don't have more time to think about these things. And yeah, Bernie Sanders would probably be surprised to hear him described as someone who's outdated, because he sees himself as the force of progress. But that's an interesting observation. And so I really enjoyed listening to you and the connections you're able to make with history, and you seem to be really well rooted in that, as well as with contemporary issues. And these are very serious issues that you'll be grappling with when Judge Draper and Professor Barlow and my tongues have ceased their wagging. So I was really inspired to listen to you.
Yeah, this was fascinating. You guys packed so much into that opening statement. I couldn't take notes fast enough to keep up with the things that you were putting out. So they read. I mean, it's completely incomprehensible to me what I'm reading here. I like that you mentioned the Johnson pardons, because that whole Reconstruction era, right? I mean, leading up to the impeachment of Johnson, is just fascinating from a constitutional point of view, and the extent to which it's seen as solving the problems of, for example, having the slave states wield excessive power in government. It's just, man, you guys opened up a whole lot of cans of worms. And as my colleagues have said, you guys, you have a great foundation for talking about this in the years ahead. You may change your minds. You may disagree with each other. You may disagree with us. You may disagree with Madison. You may disagree with Alan Broadman going forward, right? But you are well grounded in the things that you need to be concerned about, in the history of these things, and you showed it to us in this discussion today. So I hope you will take that awareness and that knowledge that you have, and continue to build on it and continue to use it in the years ahead. So thank you very much and have a great afternoon.
Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.